Hi everybody and welcome to today's webinar, which is Introduction to Excel. Today we're hosted by Deborah Ashby, who's our in-house IT trainer. Today's webinar will take about an hour, so if you do have any questions throughout, please send them in using the question pane. And we might not have opportunity to answer everyone's questions as we're completely full today, but do send them through and at some point we'll get them to Deborah to answer for you. So nothing else from me, so I'll pass you over to Deborah for the next hour.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome from me. As Paul said, my name's Deborah Ashby. I'm the IT trainer and also subject matter expert for Microsoft, and I'll be hosting your webinar today on an introduction to Excel. We've got a lot of content that we're going to cover today. There's so much that we can cover in this introductory session, and so I'm going to try and fit in as much as I can. I do have a very brief agenda, which I'll just put on the screen for you there. So we're going to just start out. This really is a basic session, so it's kind of aimed at people who you might have used Excel a little bit, just want to expand your knowledge, or it really is for complete beginners. So we're going to start right at the start. We're going to understand the fundamentals and the basics of Excel. We're going to take a look at how you enter data into spreadsheets and the different options that we have for that. And one of the big ones is creating formulas and functions. So we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the basic formulas that you can have in Excel. As I said, formulas is such a huge topic and there's so much to formulas. We could spend all day doing that, but we're just going to go through some of the most basic ones and the most common ones that you might need to use on a daily basis. We're also going to take a look at formatting your data. So when you have large amounts of data in spreadsheets, how you can format that, make it more visual, make it more interesting in your presentations. And we'll take a look at inserting certain visual elements, so things like shapes, smart art, pictures, all of those kinds of things. We're also going to take a look at your worksheet layout and data, so things like how you change the page orientation, some of those page setup options. And finally, we're just going to take a little look at printing and those print options as well. So hopefully this will give you a nice foundation so that if you do want to carry on with your Excel knowledge, go up to intermediate and then to advanced level, this will give you a really good foundation and a springboard onto those higher levels. Now, there's not going to be too many slides. In fact, that is all the slides we're going to get for today. It is going to be live demo for the majority of this session, so we can really jump into some exercises that I've got set up and take a look at some live examples. So let me just open up the first example spreadsheet. All right, now when it comes to versions, I'm actually using Excel 2016. Now if you are not using the latest version, I know a lot of people here probably are using maybe 2010 or 2013. It doesn't matter so much for this. All the functionality I'm going to show you is the same across all of those versions. So from 2010 onwards, we should be good to go. Now, let's discuss first of all the structure of our worksheet and really the structure of Excel for those of you who are not as familiar with it. As I said, from about Office 2010 onwards, Microsoft changed from a drop-down menu system to this ribbon structure that you can see just here. So we have our what we call ribbons running across the top, and those ribbons house all of our commands in separate groups. You can see here I'm clicked on the Home ribbon, and we have our different groups: clipboard, font, alignment, number, so on and so forth. All of the commands are organized in a logical fashion, or what Microsoft deemed to be a logical fashion. I'll leave that up to you to make your mind up on that one. But we have, for example, on the Insert ribbon, this is where you'll find all the commands which allow you to insert items into your spreadsheet. So you'd expect to find things like table, pictures, charts, all of those kinds of things in there. We have Page Layout ribbon. Again, this will be the page or the setup of your page. So if you're looking for where you need to change to landscape, portrait, change the size, change the margins, all of those kinds of things you'll find in Page Layout. We have our formulas, so fairly straightforward. That's where we're going to find all of our formula options. We have our Data ribbon, which is just pulling things from different sources, and also this is where you'll find your sort and your filter commands. We've got our Review ribbon where we can do things like add comments, protect our worksheet, and we'll also find spell check on there as well. And then finally we've got our View ribbon, which really kind of allows us to set up how we're viewing our workbook and our worksheet. So a very brief run through of those different ribbons. Now, one thing that we haven't mentioned is the File ribbon. Oops. Let me just reopen that. Sorry about that. One thing that we haven't looked at is the file ribbon. So if you click on File, this isn't really a ribbon. This is what Microsoft call the backstage area, and this is the same across any of your Microsoft applications, whether you're using Word or PowerPoint. That file ribbon will always take you backstage, and this is where we'll find some of our more admin-y tasks. So you'll come in here to create a new spreadsheet using the New button just there. You can open spreadsheets from here, and you'll have Save, Save As, Print, and all of your options as well. So File isn't really considered to be a ribbon. It's called the backstage area, and it does work slightly different to the other ribbons that we have on there. Now, one thing that you can do also when you're working in Excel, if you take or glance your eyes up into the top right-hand corner, you'll see you have some little icons at the top here. And this first one, when we hover over it, it says Ribbon Display Options. Now, clicking that will allow you to auto-hide that ribbon if you want to. So if I click auto-hide the ribbon, it gets rid of that ribbon and just gives me a little bit more real estate on the page. So that's particularly nice if you're working with large spreadsheets, lots of data, and you just want to get that ribbon out the way. You can very easily do that. And just click your button again, and just click Show Tabs and Commands to bring that ribbon back. So a nice way just to minimize and maximize that ribbon. Another thing, if we just stay in this kind of top area of our screen, one thing that you might find useful is something called the Quick Access Toolbar. And if you glance your eyes over to the top left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see here we have three icons, or I've got three icons, the Save, the Undo, and the Redo. And you can see that those come up as I hover over them, little tooltips. This is the Quick Access Toolbar, and you can customize this Quick Access Toolbar and add to it all the commands that you use most frequently. So that's particularly useful if you are constantly searching, or maybe you're not quite used to this version where commands are. If you want to have them more easily accessible, you can add them to this Quick Access Toolbar. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. If you look on the end there, you have a little drop-down arrow, and Microsoft has very conveniently given you some of the most common commands that you might want to add onto that Quick Access Toolbar. So you can see the ones that are currently ticked are the ones that I've got added on there. So we've got the Save, we've got the Undo, and Redo. If I wanted to, I could add in, maybe I want to add in New, and that will add that to my Quick Access Toolbar as well. So you can go through and you can add these and customize that as you wish. Now, if you do want to add a command which isn't in that list that Microsoft's given you, you can do that as well. So, for example, let's go back to the Insert ribbon. So maybe I find that I am constantly having to insert tables. I might want to add the Table command to my Quick Access Toolbar. And what I can do is I can right-click, and I will always have the option Add to Quick Access Toolbar on there. And that will then allow me to add any command on any ribbon to that Quick Access Toolbar. Okay, so we'd always recommend that you do set up your Quick Access Toolbar so that it suits you and how you work. Another thing you might want to do with that Quick Access Toolbar is change where it's actually sitting on your screen. So at the moment I have it running across the top above my ribbons, but again if I click that drop down I have the option to show below the ribbon as well, which will put it just underneath the ribbon. So some people prefer to have it down there. I'm going to move that back up because I like mine to be above the ribbon. And there we go. All right, then let's move all the way down to the bottom of the screen before we start to take a look at some of the stuff that we can do in Worksheets. So at the bottom here, again, bottom right-hand corner, you can see we have a number of little icons, and these are the different ways that you can view. It's a quick way or a shortcut way of jumping between different ways to view your spreadsheet. So you can see currently I'm clicked on Normal View. I can very quickly switch to Print Layout View and also Page Break Preview view as well. So I have my different views down there. I also have my zoom slider. So again, if I want to use that, I can zoom in and out of my spreadsheet very easily just by using that zoom slider. And you do also have other zoom options located on your view ribbon at the top. So if we click on the view ribbon, you'll see you have a little group called zoom and different selections that you can make in there as well. Now, incidentally, if we just click back on the Home ribbon, the things that you'll find on the Home ribbon are the tasks that you would use most commonly. So you'll find on there things like cut, copy, paste. You'll find all your formatting options, your alignment options, number formatting, sorting, filtering, auto sum. These are the most frequently used commands in Excel, and that is why they're on the home ribbon, so they're very easy for you to get to and access. All right. Let's just jump across to this next tab. So you'll see at the bottom we've got a number of different tabs, and by default when you open up a spreadsheet in Excel it will have 3 tabs, and you can add to those tabs, you can rename those tabs I've done down here, and all this spreadsheet or this workbook is really showing you is the different ways that you can use Excel. So when I think of Excel, I generally tend to think of it as an application that's mainly used by people who deal with numbers quite a lot. So it might be accountants or bankers, but you'll find that in most job roles you will have to use Excel at some point or another, and we can just see down here some of the uses for it. So we can see here we've got some budget projections, and some people like to use this for home budgets as well. So if you have your own budget at home, then you can use Excel for that. If I click across to the Customers tab, you can see I've got more database style information, which I may have imported into Excel from an Access database or some other kind of database, so you can kind of utilize it as a customer database as such. If we click across to employees, you can see here I'm using it for just a basic employee list, and this is formatted as a table, and I can very easily sort using the little filter arrows that I've got on the top here, which we'll take a look at a little bit later. And Excel also has really good charting capabilities as well. So if you have just like a wall full of numbers, it is sometimes quite nice to make that a little bit more visual by putting that information into a chart. So Excel is great for inserting charts as well. Now, something that we're not going to cover in this session because it is considered to be one of the more advanced features of Excel, but I just wanted to show you that you can also use pivot tables in Excel, and if you don't know what a pivot table is, don't worry. It's basically just a dynamic way of displaying a table data. So if you have a lot of information, it's a good way of being able to pull that out and analyze it a little bit easier. So the pivot table functionality of Excel is really, really good. And finally, in the Smart Art tab, this is just showing you some of the things that you can do with some of the newer features, so things like Smart Art to create hierarchy diagrams and infograms and things like that. So Excel has lots and lots of different uses. I think people would generally tend to think of it as just a place where they go to do calculations, but there is so much that you can do with it, and hopefully you'll be able to get through some of that today. Okay, I'm just going to close down this spreadsheet and open up another one. In fact, let's just minimize that one. Okay, so we have our first spreadsheet on here which we're going to work on. So a couple of other things that are worth noting as well if you are new to Excel is the different mouse pointers which you have. So you'll see, depending on which part of the spreadsheet that I'm clicked on, I have different mouse pointers, and those mouse pointers are quite important. So you can see if I'm just clicking on cells, I have that big thick white cross. However, if I'm hovering over maybe the borders of my rows, you can see it changes to a double-headed arrow, so I can move that row in and out. If I want to select a row, as soon as I hover above it, my cursor changes again to a black down arrow, and the same if I was selecting a column as well. Okay, so your cursor pointer will change depending on what area of the spreadsheet that you're clicked in. Something else with this is that we refer to cell references in here. So your spreadsheets are made up of a series of columns and a series of rows, and there are so many columns. I think there's 16,000 columns in one Excel workbook. So what you're looking at here is a workbook which contains, at the moment, 3 worksheets, and that's made up of columns, 16,000 columns, and I think there's over 1 million rows. If you do want to check that, if you, I think it's if you hold down Control and click your down arrow, it will take you to, if I come out of the table, the last row. So yeah, we've got over 1 million rows in the spreadsheet. So hopefully none of you are creating spreadsheets which are going to be 16,000 columns by over 1 million rows, and you will never ever get to that point where you run out of rows in one spreadsheet. So let's jump back up. So the way that we work in Excel is we use cell references. So Every time you click in one of these rectangles, this is called a cell, and each cell has an address, and that is called the cell reference. So you can see the cell that I'm currently clicked on, the column F is highlighted and the row 3. So that cell reference or the cell address is essentially F3. The reason why that's important, and you'll see in a moment when we start to add some formulas in, cell references really are important when you are compiling formulas, and they're just important in general in Excel. It's something which you'll constantly refer to. So F3 and E2, for example, that is your cell address or your cell location. Now, when you are clicking, so if I just come down here and we have a table of data, if I click on a cell, just in here, you'll see that the text within that cell is showing in the formula bar, or what we call the formula bar just above. So you can see where my cursor currently is up here. That is where I can go and I can make edits to this up there in the formula bar. So the formula bar will display text if that's what I have in that particular cell. However, if I click on a cell that has a formula, it's going to show me the actual formula in the formula bar. So for example, in this last column, the revenue column, if I click on the cell just there, it doesn't show me 37,216.96. It shows me the actual formula which we have up there. So F9 times H9, and that's what that asterisk means. Asterisk means multiplication in Excel. And that's how we got to that answer in the revenue field. Okay, so formula bar will show formulas if they are in that particular cell. If not, it will just show the text. And you can come up here and click in there if you need to make any edits or changes. Similarly, you don't have to edit in the formula bar. You can double click on the cell and that will make that cell editable, and you can then go in and make any changes that you need as well. All right, does anybody have any questions so far? No? We are fine. All right, let's move on. A couple of other things that you might need to be made aware of is when you're formatting. So if I'm clicking on a cell just here and maybe I'm highlighting, you will get a little mini toolbar pop up. So you'll see this mini toolbar pop up from time to time, and it's just a quick way of being able to apply formatting to whichever text you have in that cell. So instead of switching back to the home ribbon to make your text bold or change the color, you do have access to that little mini toolbar very nice and quickly and easily from there as well. Something else that you have which can help you out a great deal is up by your ribbons you have this little tell me what to do box. Now this actually only applies if you're using the 2016 version, which is the latest version. So for those of you that do have Excel 2016, I'll quickly show you this because it is quite nice. If you're ever kind of curious or you're not sure what to do on a particular command, so for example if I want to look up format cells, I can type it into the tell me box and it will pull up a list, and the top one is format cells, and it will take me directly to where that command is located in Excel. So it can be really, really useful. Another thing that's also quite useful with this built-in help system is if I type in format cells again, you'll see just underneath I have a get help on format cells, and that's just a quick way to jump to help on that particular item. You can still press F1 if that's what you're used to doing, but that's just a quick way of jumping to your help as well. Lovely, and let's just close that spreadsheet down. So we're going to move on to taking a look at entering data, and this is where we're going to start to actually build up our spreadsheet and put some things into our spreadsheet. So I'm just going to jump across to the data entry tab first of all, and I'm going to click in cell A2, and let me zoom in to make this a little bit easier for you to see. So again, I'm going down to the bottom right hand corner and I'm going to use my zoom controls just to zoom into that spreadsheet. I'm going to click in A2 and I'm going to type the word sales, and then underneath, and I just use my down arrow to get to the cell below, I'm going to type in the word expenses, but I'm going to spell it wrong. Okay, so if I then need to go back and make a correction in there, I can click on the cell, but you need to double click. So you either need to double click in that cell to access it, or you can edit it from the formula bar just there. So I'm just going to change that to expenses. And then I'm going to put profits underneath. Okay, so nice and easy to edit your cell. Now, if I go to type in a number in cell B2, so maybe I want to type in the amount of sales. So let's say I want to type in 120, but I accidentally press the O instead of the 0. So it looks like that. And then in expenses, I type in 160, but I type that incorrectly. You'll see that they align in slightly different ways. So the way that Excel works by default is if it thinks that something in the cell is text, then it will align it to the left, whereas it will align all numbers to the right of the column. Okay, and that is why we have two different things in there. Because I've typed in the letter O instead of the number 0, it says, oh, hang on, this is text, and it aligns it to the left. Okay, you could go in and you could use your alignment tools to align it back over, but just so you know that the default for numbers will be to align over to the right, and that's what they should look like when you've typed them in correctly. All right, let's move across to the Autofill tab. So this spreadsheet a little bit further on. So we've added in some numbers. We've got our sales figures, we've got our overhead figures, and then we don't have anything in profits at the moment. Now, Excel has a little feature which you're going to find so useful. It's called Autofill, and it will autofill series of data for you. So for example, I might want to add in at the top here months of the year. So I can type the first one, January. Now I could go through and press my arrow, type in February, March, April. I don't need to do that. All I need to do is use my autofill handle, drag across, and it will pick it up because Excel does recognize certain series of data. So again, if you hover your mouse over, and I don't know if you can see, it's quite tiny, in the bottom right-hand corner there is a tiny little square. If you hover your mouse over it, you'll see that cursor. As I said, your cursor will change depending on what you're doing. Will become a little tiny black cross, and you can then just drag that across and it will fill in all the months of the year for you. Now that would work, I'm just going to undo that. That would work if you typed in just Jan as well, so you don't have to type in the full thing. It would work like that also. Okay, so there are certain series of data that Excel will pick up and recognize. It will pick up days of the week. So if I type in Monday, I can then drag down and it will automatically add all those in. It does also work with numbers, so again there has to be a pattern in order for Excel to pick it up as and be able to auto-fill it. So again, if I would do 5 and then underneath I type 10, I would need to highlight both and then drag down. Excel will recognize the pattern and it will fill in those numbers for us. So again, it's just a quick way of entering data. And you will see when we get into, if you attend, I think we're doing an intermediate session on Excel in a few weeks. If you attend that one, you'll see how you can add in your own series, create your own series, maybe lists of names of people in your department to make your life a little bit easier as well. So that's kind of something which we do in the intermediate session, but there are already some inbuilt ones for you to use. Now, when it comes to, and we're kind of moving slightly into formulas now, and just fiddling around with some basic formulas. So you can see here we've got our sales and we have our overhead figures. So sales are 120, overhead is 100, and then we need to work out what the profit is going to be. Now, that's not a particularly, I'm not very good at maths, but even I know that that's not a particularly complicated calculation. I can pretty much work that out off the top of my head, but for the most part, most of your calculations are not going to be that straightforward and simple, so you're probably going to want to add a formula into your spreadsheet. Now, what I could do is, or if you were looking at this with no Excel knowledge whatsoever, you might think, okay, so I'm going to type in 120 minus 100. Now, if we do that, that's not going to work. It's not going to give us the answer. It's just going to show me the data that I've entered. What I need to do is I need to tell Excel that I'm about to type a formula, and the way that you do that is by typing the equals sign. So that is how Excel knows, right, I'm now doing a calculation, I need to display the calculation as opposed to just displaying the text that you're going to type in there. So I've got my equals sign, so let's try that again. I could do 120 minus 100 and press enter, and there we go, it gives me the correct answer, 20. If I click on that cell and look up to the formula bar, I can see there equals 120 minus 100. Fabulous. Now, what if any of that data changed? If maybe 3 weeks later we need to go in and change this data, if I click in overhead and change that to 80, my profit is not going to update. It still says 20, so that answer is now incorrect. And you can imagine if you've done that in a very, very large spreadsheet, having to go through and correct absolutely everything is going to take you quite a lot of time, which is why, in general, we wouldn't recommend that you type in the actual numbers when you're doing formulas. This is where we would use cell references. Okay, so let me just undo and go back. So instead of typing 120 minus 100, I'm going to do equals, and then I'm going to select the cell that the number is in. So in this case, I'm going to click B2 minus B3, and then press enter. So that gives me the same answer of 20, but the difference is that when I go back and click in overhead and maybe change this to 80, that now updates nicely. Okay, so always use cell references when you are doing calculations. I'm just going to change that back to 100. Okay, so B2 minus B3. Perfect. What we can then do is on this same subject of autofill is I'm going to need to do that same exact formula for all of the months. So again, I could go through and do exactly the same, type it in, but that does take quite a while. Again, if you've got a lot of data, that will take a while. You can use the autofill for this. So again, if we go down to the bottom, we can drag that formula across all of those months to give us our answers. And the good thing about Excel, if we click on here, move across to the next cell, you can see it automatically moves across as we move across. So C2 minus C3, D2 minus D3, it knows what we want to do. Okay, so that is autofill, a really, really useful feature. It's probably going to be one of the things that you find you use the most. I know it's something that I use more than anything when I'm doing formulas. I'm going to touch back on this in a moment. I just want to jump across to the dates and times spreadsheet as well. When it comes to entering dates and times into your spreadsheet, again, we would always recommend, it will always put it in with a slash format just here. So if I was to type in something with dashes along those lines, it's going to change those to slashes, so just be aware of that as well. We wouldn't really recommend you using dots when you're typing in dates. I mean, it will put it in, but we just wouldn't recommend it because sometimes these dots can get a little bit confused. So always try and enter in slashes. If you put in hyphens, it's going to convert them into slashes anyway. And also with times, we would always recommend putting in a colon in between your numbers as opposed to a dot, okay? And also putting in whether it's PM or AM. By default, Excel will consider it to be AM if you don't specify. So again, that's just something to bear in mind when you are entering in dates and times into cells in Excel. Just coming back or jumping across to our figures just here, so in comments, it's always a good idea to comment on your spreadsheet. Comments is a great feature which a lot of people don't tend to use to its full advantage. It's quite nice if you're collaborating on documents with others to be able to add comments into your spreadsheet. So again, for example, in the June column over here, if I click on where it says 440, maybe I want to query that figure, so maybe I need to send this back to the sales team and say, can you please check that this figure is correct? I would probably want to add in a comment into here. And comments you will find on the review ribbon at the top, because in general it's something which you do at the end when you're reviewing your final draft. So that's where I have my new comment button. And I can then put, please review this figure. And you can see any cells that do have comments in them because they will have a little triangle in the corner, in this case a little red triangle, and if you hover over it will allow you to see what that comment is. Let me just zoom out slightly so that's a bit easier to see. So quite nice and easy. And if you have multiple comments on your spreadsheet, maybe you want to display them all the time instead of having them hidden, you can come up here and you can do show all comments from your review ribbon, and that will show any comments that have been entered on that page. You can also, if you want to, print comments separately from the rest of your workbook, which I'll show you how to do when we get to the printing stage, but you can have all the comments printed kind of separately to your worksheets and your workbooks, which is sometimes quite nice and useful as well. All right, and just finally, just to finish off this exercise, just a little bit on saving your worksheets. So once we've started making some edits like we've done in here, we're probably going to want to save our document. So again, save is something that you'll find on that quick access toolbar at the top. So the first icon that we have up there is a save button. So I can save that way. Alternatively, I can go into File, and I have my save option just there, or save as, and this will take you into and allow you to save to however you normally save. So for example, you can see here I save to OneDrive, I also save to SharePoint, I can save to my PC locally if I want to, so you'll see in there if you're working somewhere that has a share drive or some kind of network drive, you'll probably see those located in there as well. So for example, if I wanted to save just to my desktop, I could come into here, select desktop, and then I can just go about saving in the normal fashion. Now something that is worth noting is save as type down here. This is where you can specify what kind of type you're saving this document as, and you'll see there is one in there that says Excel 97 to 2003. So this is something we would recommend if you plan on maybe sending or sharing this document with somebody who uses an old version of Excel. There are people out there who are still using versions 2003 and earlier, and they sometimes struggle to open documents which have been created in 2010, 2013, 2016. So we can help them out a little bit by saving in this Excel 97 to 2003 workbook format. So just bear that in mind when you're saving as well as to who that is being saved for. Lovely. Let's close down that spreadsheet and move on to our next one. And there's a little bit of backwards and forwards of spreadsheets in this session. Okay. Now we're going to come back and touch on formulas again. So we did just a little bit in our last spreadsheet where we put in our profits in here. So I'm just quickly going to put those in again and copy that formula across, which is what we did in the last exercise. Now here we also have a total column. So again, I'm going to do a kind of similar thing in here. Now, what I could do is, following on from the pattern that we learned, I'm going to type in equals. Now, if I want to add up all of these figures from January, February, March, April, May and June, I could go through typing in B2 plus C2 plus D2, so on and so forth. But again, that's tedious, it's time consuming. I only have a little bit of data here, but again, if you had lots of data, that's going to take you quite a long time to do. So it's not really the most effective or best way of doing things. So we kind of want to bunch our calculation together. So I'm going to start off with equals again, but this time I'm going to type in the word sum. And sum is what we call a function in Excel. And I'm going to do open bracket, and I will explain this to you in a moment if you've never come across this before, and I'm then going to highlight all of my data, and then I'm going to close my bracket. Okay, so let's just take a look at what that's doing. I'm saying equals, we're doing a formula. I'm then typing in the function sum, so that's saying add up whatever I've got in brackets next. So I'm going to put in brackets the cell references. Instead of typing in B2, C2, D2, so on and so forth, I just highlighted what I need, so it's saying B2 to G2, and it's put it in brackets. So now, when I press enter, that gives me the answer. And remember, you only need to do it once because you can use your autofill handle to drag that information down. Fairly easy. There is a different way of doing it, so I'm going to undo, and this makes it even quicker. Instead of you going in and typing in sum, so on and so forth, you can get Excel to do that for you. On your home ribbon, right in the end at the editing group, you'll see you have a button just here, and if I hover over, you'll see it says sum. And there is a little drop-down arrow next to that, and you'll see here we have sum, average, count numbers, max and min. These are probably the 5 most common functions that people use. So we have little quick jumps to them. So if I want to add up those same numbers, if I click on sum, it does it for me. I don't have to put in anything, and I can press enter, and there is my total. So again, that makes it really, really simple for you to do your calculations. Again, you could just drag down. I'm not bothering, but you could just drag down to get those calculations in there as well. The same thing applies for averages. So again, in the next column, I need to work out the average of those numbers. And if we all remember back to school, how you work out an average, you take the total and you divide the total by the number of items. So in this case, the total is 1,505. So I would want to divide that by January to June. So divide it by 6. So I could type in equals, because we're writing a formula. I could give it my cell reference of H2, and I could do divided by, and the slash is the sign for divided by 6 to get my answer, which is correct. I could do that. However, I don't want to do that. I like things to be as easy as they possibly can be. I can just go back up to that same button that we went to before and select average. Now what it will do here, you'll see it has put in the formula for us, but it's also including the total. Now I don't want to include the total, I just want the average of January to June. So you can at this point modify by just dragging your selection across, like so, just to change that. And then press enter. And that will give us the same answer. And we can then go in and we can copy that formula down nice and easy. Okay, so remember you do have your basic, your most popular commands listed in the top just there. Now if we just take a look at these averages, this kind of leads us on to something else, and that is number formatting. So I've added these averages in, and you can see I've got lots of characters after the dot. Now I don't really care about the 0.8333. I really just want to have it as 2 decimal places after the decimal point. So again, I can change that by going to my home ribbon, and in this little number group here, this will allow you, you've got 2 buttons, increase decimal and decrease decimal. So I can change that by bringing those down like so. And again, you could highlight, if you had a whole column, you could highlight the whole lot and do it that way. So you can make your adjustments in that way. Nice and straightforward. Does anybody have any questions at this stage? Any questions coming through?
Yeah, just a couple of questions that have come through. Question from Agatha, who asks if you'd be able to comment on protecting a sheet and workbook.
That's not on the agenda to include in today's session. If there is time at the end, I could possibly just cover it if you have anything specific you need to know, but that's something which we would cover in the intermediate session, which we're actually doing one in a couple of weeks. But if we have time at the end, I can add that in.
Okay, and one more just coming from Leslie. It says, is there a quick way of adding and subtracting from different columns and rows rather than all of them?
Adding and subtracting from different columns and rows. So if I take that, let's see, so if we do equals here, so yeah, I mean if I wanted to, for example, if you look at the spreadsheet we've got on here, and I think this is what you're talking about, Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, if I wanted to take this number, so 160 that we have in March, if I click on it, and if I want to add it to something else from another column, if I click plus, I can then just click on that cell and press enter. And that will give me my total of those two. Those are from different columns. Hopefully Leslie will tell me if I've answered her question or not. I think so. I think that's what you mean. So yeah, if you want to add or subtract things from different columns, then that's fine. You just select the column, the cell reference essentially. So it works in exactly the same way. Lovely. Thank you for those questions. All right, let's move on. So I'm just going to click on my copy formulas tab. In fact, I think we've done that one. Right, so just moving on a little bit with those formulas. So you can see here at the bottom, from where I've got cell A8 down to A11, you can see I've got all of the different symbols that you need in order to perform calculations in Excel. So the first one there is brackets. And I don't know if any of you remember this from school. I certainly do, unfortunately. Something called BODMAS. You may have learnt it in maths class, which stands for brackets over division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. And this is the rule that Excel applies when it's doing calculations. So basically, it will do anything that you've got in brackets first, and then it will do the other things in the order that I've got listed there. So then it will do multiplication, division, and finally it will do addition and subtraction. And let me just kind of try and illustrate that for you and what we mean by that. If I was to type into this cell just here, equals, and let me just find my example, there we go. If I type in 10 plus 2 divided by 2. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I want to do 10 plus 2 and then divide it by 2. So the answer I'm looking for is 6 essentially. So I've typed that in, 10 plus 2 divided by 2. I've pressed enter, I get the answer of 11. Now why do I get the answer of 11? Let's take a look. Let's click back on the cell and see what we're doing. So what is Excel doing? It's basically doing 10 plus 2 divided by 2. So it's doing the 2 divided by 2 first to give an answer of 1, and then it's adding the 10, which is why we're getting the answer of 11. Excel doesn't know which part of that formula to execute first, which is why we use brackets, because brackets is always the first thing which Excel will do. So in order to make this have this work out correctly, I'm just going to delete that out. I'm going to type in equals, and I'm going to type in sum. I'm going to open my bracket. I'm going to do 10 plus 2. Oops. I'm going to close my bracket, and then I'm going to do divided by 2. And then we get my answer of 6. Okay, so that is the difference. You want whatever you want it to do first, you put within brackets, and then you put the rest afterwards. Okay, that is the general rule when you're doing formulas in Excel, and you can see here what order it will do the calculations in, all applying to that rule of BODMAS. And I'm sorry to bring up horrible memories of maths class for some of you. All right, let's take that out. Okay, so let's take a look at filling in some of these year-to-date profits. And let me just find where I am. Yeah, okay. So year-to-date profits, this is basically a running total of how much profit we have made this year. So you can see here in January the profit's 20, in February it's 30, so I want it to be cumulative as we run across. So again, we're going to use formulas. I'm going to type in equals. And for this one, in January, my year-to-date profit is just 20. So I can just simply select that cell, and that gives me my year-to-date profit. The next one, when I move across, if I do equals, I basically want it to add this profit to this profit to give us our cumulative or our running total. So I'm going to select this plus this and press enter. And what I can do is then I can drag that formula across, and that will give me those running totals. Okay, so just slightly different ways of how you can do these different things. So now moving on from there, now you've kind of got that concept of formulas, or you're starting to get the concept of formulas, using those sums, equals, putting things in brackets if you want it to be done first. Let's move on to taking a look at something called absolute referencing. And I know that when I first learned Excel, for some reason I found this really difficult to get my head around, and it's really straightforward. It was just a real mental block with me, the difference between what we could call absolute referencing and relative referencing. Everything we've done so far with regards to when we're filling our totals across, that's all relative referencing. Excel will modify the formula as you drag. So it will say, okay, add up C2 to C3, now add up D2 to D3, and it will modify it as you go across. So it's relative. We're going to look at something now called absolute referencing, which is slightly different. So what we have here is a spreadsheet. We have a list of employees, we have their department, we have their hire date, and we have their salary. And you see we have a new salary column which currently is empty. Now all of our lucky employees are going to get a pay rise of £2,000. So we want to add that into the new salary column. So with the knowledge that we've gained of how to do this, this should be very simple for us. So I can click in this salary for Lisa Page. I'm going to type in equals, I'm going to select her salary, so E3, and I'm just going to do plus 2,000 because we're adding £2,000 on. And I can go through and I can drag that down like so. Okay. So those are all my totals in there. Don't worry too much. I know these have all got green triangles in the corner, which ordinarily will indicate there's maybe something wrong. It's just because I've got these cells protected slightly on this worksheet. So don't worry too much about that green thing in the corner. So that is our salary with 2,000 added on. Nice and simple. That is relative referencing. So again, if we look up into our formula bar, you can see here E3 plus 2,000. When I dragged it down, Excel changed it to E4 plus 2,000, E5 plus 2,000. It changed relative to where I was dragging. Now, absolute referencing is something slightly different, and I'm just going to undo to get us back to blank. So say instead of increasing everybody's salary by £2,000, I want to increase their salary by 2.1%. So it means I'm always going to reference the same cell in my formula. So first of all, let's take a look at what happens when we do it incorrectly. So I'm going to click on equals. And I'm going to select E3, and I'm going to do the multiplication sign. When we're working out percentages, we do multiplication. So multiplication, which is the asterisk, and I'm going to select H2. I press enter. That gives me the increase for the new salary. So it doesn't give me the actual new salary, it's just telling me the increase at the moment. And if I was to drag that down, is that going to work? No, it's not. Why is that? Because when we click on the cell below, you see now it's referencing H3, which is a blank cell in Excel, because it will always move down. That's what relative referencing does. So we need to tell Excel, for this particular calculation, that we always want to refer to cell H2. So we make it absolute. So let's come out of here. So let's do that again. I'm going to do equals. I'm going to select my salary. I'm going to do multiplied by, and then I'm going to select 2.1. Now, instead of hitting enter here and then dragging down, I'm going to say make that cell H2 absolute, which means it doesn't change no matter where I copy that formula down. And to do that, to make something a cell reference absolute, you press the F4 key on your keyboard. So that's F4 on your keyboard, and that will put little dollar signs in front of the row and the column number, and that essentially sticks that there. So when I drag down, it's always going to refer back to that particular cell. So when I press enter, and now if I drag down, I should find that that is correct. Okay, and you'll see if I click on here and look in the formula bar, it's always H2. Okay, so you make something absolute by pressing that F4 key. Now this still isn't really what I want in here. I want the total new salary. I just want to know how much their salary is going to be increased by. So I'm going to back out of there, and we're just going to finish this formula. So let's do equals. So we're going to do E3, and we're going to do times by H2. Sorry, wrong one. I want to do sum, brackets, E3 times H2. So that's going to give me the percentage of increase, and then I want to plus the salary again. So I want to add E3. Okay, so let's just explain that, because that is a little bit more complex than we've done before. So we're saying we're doing a formula. We want to add up what's in brackets first. So we're doing E3, so 54,550, times by 2.1, which is the amount that we want to increase by, and then plus the salary. So again, I want to make this absolute by pressing F4, and that should give us our correct total. And then we can drag that formula down, and that should be correct. Okay, so you can see there you can start to get a little bit more complex with your formulas, and when I click on that, if you look up in the formula bar, you see you've composed or put together there quite a nice formula, but a really functional formula as well. So once you get those basics down and straight in your head, it is quite easy to start putting together more complex formulas. Lovely. Let's move across to another spreadsheet. Now another thing that can make your life a little bit easier, as I said, I'm just going to add in some columns in here for count, min and max. These are some other functions that you might find really useful. So again, on your home ribbon in the top right hand corner, do you remember we went up here and we were using our sum and our average? This is a quick way of finding those out. You also have count, numbers, max and min up here, which can also be really useful. I'm just going to show you in this bottom example just here. So using this data for January to June, if I want to use the count feature, I'm going to select count numbers. I'm just going to modify that so it doesn't include that blank cell and press enter. And what count will do is it will basically count how many items you have. So in this case we have 6 items, and I could drag that down as usual. Min will show you, or it will give you the lowest number in your range selection. So again, if we go back up to our little shortcut menu and do min, and I'm going to select my data and press enter, and that's telling me that 11 is the lowest number out of that selection, which I can easily see is correct, and I can pull that down as well. And the same thing for max at the top here. And reselect my data, and it's going to show me the highest number in that list. So those really are, from that drop-down menu, nice little functions and features, and they are there because they are the most popular functions to use in Excel. So very, very simple, makes it very nice and easy for you to use. Does anybody have any questions about that at this stage? I know formulas sometimes does raise quite a few different questions. No? All right, lovely. Let's move on now to something completely different. So I'm going to close down this spreadsheet. Hopefully that's just kind of giving you a basic overview, a little bit raising your interest in formulas. I'm going to do a little bit of work on spreadsheet formatting next. All right. Now, one of the biggest things with Excel, and we've probably all had it, where we've been sent an Excel spreadsheet, and it's just like looking at a wall of data, a wall of numbers. It's not particularly interesting. Recently, over the last year, I've run so many training courses of companies who want to learn how to make their spreadsheets more interactive, more interesting, more visually interesting for people to look at, and because if it's just a wall of numbers, then it's not particularly inspiring, shall we say. So there's been a lot of kind of work, particularly in the later versions of Excel, of adding features which are going to make your data more interesting when you display it. So let's take a look at some of those functions. Some of these you might be already aware of. So on our first spreadsheet just here, so you can see I've got quite a few different spreadsheets running across the bottom. So in the first one called fonts, I'm just going to click in this cell here, so D1, and this is what houses my title at the top here. So again, basic formatting. Using my home ribbon, I can change the font of that, I can make it bigger, I can change the color, I can do all the usual things I would expect to be able to do from that font formatting group. Remember, in Excel, you also have, and these ribbons, right in the corner of every group, can you see in this font group there's a little tiny arrow? If you click those little arrows in the corner of the group, it will take you through to your more advanced features, or for some of you who are used to using older versions of the applications, that will look more familiar to you. You're used to those kinds of dialog boxes and windows. So clicking that little down arrow will take you into that. So if you need to do a strike through, superscript, so on and so forth. And speaking of which, I think we have down here, Yeah, you see where we've got E equals MC squared and H2O. You can see the little 2's there. We've got one is in superscript, one is in subscript. So if I was to do that, for example, I would type it like that. And then I'd want to be making the 2, so I can just highlight it. I'm going to go into my font options and I can make it, I can't remember if it's, I think it's superscript, isn't it? And click OK, just to change that like that. So a quick way of getting into those advanced options by clicking on that little down arrow at the side. Lovely. Now, things that you can also do in here, adjusting your cells and your columns and rows, things like that. You can drag any of your columns at the top. So you'll see as I hover in between two columns, I've got my little double-ended arrow, and I can drag those columns out, make them bigger, make them smaller, so on and so forth. A nice little trick if you have, and I'm just going to sort of if you kind of have a spreadsheet where all the columns are a little bit crazy, you know, say they look like that, if you want to very quickly resize every single column so that everything fits nicely, a good way of doing it is just to highlight the entire spreadsheet, and there is a couple of ways that you can highlight the entire spreadsheet. You can press Control-A on your keyboard, which will highlight everything, or alternatively, if you prefer to use your mouse, you can click your mouse. You can see over here, right in the top corner where we've got A and then 1, if I click just above that, that will highlight my entire spreadsheet. And what I can then do is hover my mouse over any of the column dividers until I get that double-ended cross or double-ended arrow, and then double click, and that will resize everything to the width of the largest thing in that particular cell, which might not be too great. As you can see here, this is very wide, so I could just squeeze that up, but for the most part it will size everything until the largest thing in your spreadsheet. Lovely, so nice and easy to resize your rows. You can also, if you're somebody who prefers to, if you're looking for a very specific row width or column width, shall we say, sorry, row height or column width, you can right click and you have a row height option just here, and that will allow you to be very specific with your row height, exactly how you want it, so you can kind of put it in there as well instead of dragging up and down. Again, when it comes to inserting columns, and I'm just going to move on to this rows and columns spreadsheet because this is actually very, very easy. If you want to insert a column, for example, if I wanted to put one in between D and E, if I highlight my column, right-click, I have an insert option just there, okay? And it will put a column in. And the same with row, you can just go in there, select insert, and it will put another row in there for you. Very, very nice and straightforward. Now with this title, you can see here, this title, Sales and Profits, is kind of going across multiple different cells. Now it might be that you want to merge all of these cells so that this is kind of treated as one cell. So you see here, the title kind of goes across all these different cells. So I'm going to highlight all of them. And again, on my format, in my alignment group, I have my merge and center option. So that kind of will merge everything into one cell. So I can then, if I change the background, it will be the background of the entire thing as opposed to just what was contained in cell D1. I can then do things like vertical alignments, which makes it quite nice. So in this spreadsheet, maybe I want this sales and profits title to be aligned to the top with my logo. And I do have my vertical alignment tools. Again, in my alignment group just above here, you can see currently we're aligned to the bottom. I can choose to align to the middle or align all the way to the top if I want to. So now not only do you have your horizontal alignment, you have vertical alignment in there as well. Also within that alignment group, and I'm just going to select these titles just here, I have the option of changing the orientation of text, and I can angle it counterclockwise, clockwise. So I'm just going to put it like so. So you can really kind of start to make your spreadsheets stand out a little bit more, format them very nicely. You can add things like borders. So if I wanted to add a border to maybe the headings just here, again I can highlight. And going up to my little home group here, I have the option for borders. So I could put a border all the way around the outside of there if I wanted to. It's a very thin border, but we've got a border around there nonetheless. And you can then go in and you've got your border formatting options, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can really start to use that font formatting toolbar to really make your spreadsheets look very nice. All right, we're going to jump across to conditional formatting because again this is something which I think is quite a nice thing to use, and it's something which we train all the time when we're talking about making spreadsheets a lot more visual as well. Instead of just having a load of data as we have here, we have on our home ribbon, we have a styles group, and you'll see here the first button is called conditional formatting, and there's loads of different things that you can do in here, and it's really, really useful when it comes to highlighting certain pieces of data on your spreadsheet. So for example, in this salary column, I'm just going to select the salary column, I'm going to go to conditional formatting, and I'm going to go to highlight cell rules. So I could put in essentially a little rule that says highlight any cells that are over or greater than or less than a specific number. So I could say highlight any cells that are greater than, and you can see that by default it's put in 55,660. I'm going to put in anything that's over 49,000. Don't know if we have too many in there. Yeah, we do have a few. And you can specify kind of what color you want to have them highlighted in. So I might want to have them as yellow and do OK. So it's a way of very quickly pulling out information using rules. So you have quite a few of those in conditional formatting, greater than, less than, between two numbers, equal to, so on and so forth. Similarly, you have underneath that the top and bottom rules. So you could choose to show the top 10% of items or the bottom 10% of items. But probably the three most common that people use when they're formatting their spreadsheets are data bars, color schemes, and icon sets. So data bars, I'm just going to apply one to this column, make it red. It's just a way of visually representing those numbers in that particular column. It's just a lot more impactful, shall we say, to people looking at a presentation, a lot easier for them to read. So we would always recommend you do try and make things a little bit more visual. Another one you can use is color scale. So this works kind of like a heat map in a way, and you have a few different colors that you can use. Basically, on this one, the darkest one is the highest number, so it just very easily allows me to see what is the highest number in that long list of numbers using my conditional formatting. And then finally, one which I have to say I never use, but I'm sure people out there do, otherwise they wouldn't have added it, and that is the icon set. So again, I'll just hover over so you can see. It kind of shows you, sort of shows you trends in a way, you know, what's stayed the same, what's going up, what's going down. It's all relative to the other data in the table, so it might be something you want to use. So again, they're just there to make things a little bit easier, a little bit more visual. Moving across to the Tables tab, now this is something, this is probably the command that I use most often. Whenever or as soon as I get sent any kind of data in Excel, the first thing I will always do is format it as a table. It just makes everything so much easier. So, for example, if I've been sent this spreadsheet, the first thing I will do is come up to my home ribbon and go to Format as Table, and I will choose a format for my particular table. This is just really colors, so I'm just going to select, and it's going to say what data are you using for your table. It will automatically select the data on the page, so you can just click OK. And now I have my data in a table. Now what that does, it's going to put at the top here, not only does it format it so it's a bit nicer to read, it's going to add in some what we call filters on the top of each of these columns. So I can see here, I can very easily sort and filter out things using these filters. So when I click the drop down next to employee name, it's showing me everybody who's in that list, all of the employees. If I wanted to, I can untick them all, and maybe I just want to see information for James, Robert and David, and do OK, and it very quickly allows me to filter that list. I can combine filters as well, so maybe I wanted to see the data for those three people, but maybe I only wanted to see the people who worked in the quality assurance team. I can then untick the other box and filter even further. So it's a really good way of just pulling information out very, very quickly. And if I want to clear those filters, I can do clear filter from department like so to put my data back. Okay, so filters are really, really nice. You don't just have to apply them through adding a table or formatting as a table. You do have your filters. If we click on data, you can add filters to any series of data. So if you've got column headings at the top, you can click filter and it will add these little drop-down arrows. It's just useful that when you do that format as table command, it will automatically put those filters in for you as well. So now that we have formatted this as a table, what you'll see is we now have the Table Tools contextual ribbon showing at the top. So this only appears when it's needed. So now that we have a table in our Excel spreadsheet, we're now getting our Table Tools. It's giving me access to the Design tab. So this is where I'll find all of the things relating to my table. I can go in, I can change the color if I want to. You've got various different options when it comes to the design. So I could choose to, if I don't like the way these rows look, I could take the banding of the rows off and maybe I want to band the columns like so. So you really can kind of play around with it and make it look how you like it to look. And there's various different options that I can have on here. Now one of the new things which is really, really nice is this slicer option, and this can be used with tables like we're doing now. It can also be used with pivot tables. I know we haven't talked much about that, and we do cover that in the advanced session, but slicers are really, really good for pulling out information, shall we say. So let's just take a quick look at adding a couple. So I'm going to click here, Insert Slicer. And what it's done is it's basically given me all of my column headings just here. So it really depends kind of what I want to filter by. So maybe I want to filter by department. It's another way of sorting and filtering essentially. So I'm going to select department. I'm going to do OK. And it gives me this little floating panel which I can then put in. I'm just going to resize that down a little bit because it is quite large. So, and I'm going to put my little slicer just there. So it's just a very quick way of me being able to click. If I want to see everybody in the creative department, I just click creative and it immediately pulls those people out. So it's just a really nice way of being able to do filters quickly. You can combine the two as well by holding down your control key and selecting more than one, and it will give you those as well. So really, really nice. You can have as many filters as you like on a page. You'll also see when I click on the slicer, I have slicer options at the top. So again, if you want to change the color, you can do that, and there's various different options for your slicer and slicer tools. So those are really, really nice little things. And as I said, you can use them with tables and also with pivot tables. And then finally on this page, we have inserting shapes and pictures. So again, if you use Word or anything like that, you're probably already used to how you insert pictures, graphs, charts, those kinds of things. It's not that different in Excel. We would go to our Insert ribbon, and this is where you have all the different things that you can insert into your Excel spreadsheet. So again, we have pictures that we can insert. So if I click on Pictures and go to our exercise files, I think I have, yep. I'm going to put in a pair of trainers, or sneakers as they're called here. Put those into my spreadsheet, and as usual, now that we clicked on, we have our picture tools. I can make color corrections, I can do things like add artistic effects, all the same things that you would expect to find if you're putting a picture into Word. I can add a border, picture effects, and I can resize, rotate, anything I need to do. So pretty much exactly the same as the other applications. And again, same thing with, if we go to Insert, I have an option for online pictures as well. So this is fairly new for Microsoft Office. It will allow you to go away and pick up pictures directly from online sources, so directly from Google or Bing or wherever you like to browse, and insert them directly into your Excel spreadsheets as well. And obviously this is where we would come to insert things like charts. And charts is something which we will cover in the intermediate session, because charts is quite a large topic. I did debate if I could kind of squeeze a few in this session, but unfortunately Unfortunately not, as we are pretty much out of time. So charts we will cover in the next session. And very finally, before I let you go, I just want to go through a couple of things with regards to page layout and printing as well, just the basics of that. So page layout, let's jump across to the page layout ribbon. Now this is where you'll find things like your margins, orientation, size, things like that. So margins by default will be set to normal. You can change those to wide or narrow, and you can also, if you really want to get into it, if you have a specific margin size that you need to set, if you go to custom margin, you really can kind of get into that and customize that exactly how you want it. But for the most part, you can probably leave them at normal. Orientation, so portrait versus landscape, that's fairly self-explanatory. Paper size, mine's set to A4. Print area, that's quite an interesting one. You can set Excel just to print certain portions of your spreadsheet. So you don't necessarily, if you go to print, don't necessarily have to print out the entire spreadsheet every single time. If I just wanted to print maybe, oops, I don't want to move it, this little part, I could select that just there, and I could set the print area. So now if I was to go and go to print, you can see it's only showing me in print preview that little part where I've set the print area. Okay, so that's quite nice, but you have to remember that you have set it in order to clear it, otherwise every single time it's only going to print that little area. So if you do find you've got a spreadsheet and you go to print it and every time it's only printing out a tiny little part, I would definitely go back and check out that you don't have that print area still set. You can also do things like print titles. So this will print, if you've got any titles running across the top, it will print those as well. So page setup, if you click on the little drop down arrow, you've also got things like headers and footers in here. So if you need to add headers, footers, you can add those to your page as well. So that's just a very, very brief overview on page setup. Again, this doesn't work that much differently to Word. There's a lot of similar options in there. When it comes to printing, if we click on File and Print, you can see here you've got your print preview combined in with your print options. So here this is where I specify how many copies, and then I have my settings underneath. So currently I'm choosing to print all active sheets, so anything that's got data on it basically, or I could print the entire workbook, or print selection. So that's an alternative to setting print area, print selection. I could, again, instead of setting the print area, if I just want to temporarily print something, I could select it and then go File, Print, and if I select Print Selection, it's only going to print what I've selected. Okay, so that's another way of printing something fairly small. And again, I can adjust my options here. So again, we've got the margins, the paper size, orientation, so on and so forth. And I've got my page set up, my link directly back to here in case I want to add any more options in. Now, I'm just going to clear that selection. When it comes to printing, and this is a problem which I see people come across all the time, and I used to work on a help desk. This is probably one of the most common calls that we got, was people attempting to print their Excel spreadsheets and not being able to fit everything on the page and not knowing how to resolve it. So if you think about it, there's only so much space that you have on a page or on a piece of paper when it comes to printing, and you may have done this wonderful spreadsheet, it's got all of this data on it, you go to print it, and then it doesn't look particularly great because it's breaking across different pages because you just don't have enough room, or you haven't maximized and utilized all of the room correctly on your page. And this is where I will always go straight into page break preview. So for example, if I wanted to print this, I'm going to go to the View ribbon and I'm going to go to page break preview, and immediately that's going to show me page 1, page 2, and it shows me this blue line down the middle. So if I was to print this, I can see that this is going to be on page 1 and the rest of this table is going to be on page 2. Now I don't want that to happen. I want the whole lot, no matter how small it's going to be on page 1. So what I can do from here is I can drag that across and just adjust that. So now everything is going to print on page one. That is so useful. I only got 2 pages there, but if you've got a document that's got like 30 different sheets and you're trying to work out, you know, what's printing where, Page Break Preview is your friend. You go in there and you can really kind of see what you're doing and make the relevant adjustments. So I would always recommend going into there and adjusting those before you go into print. So now when I go to File and Print, oh, she says, let me go back. What am I looking at? Oh, is it because I've got set print area? Hang on. Oh, I know why. Sorry. Yeah. That's better. Okay, so I can see what I've got there. So just want to go to that one. And I've got 45 pages in here, so there's loads. So you can see lots of things are split across the pages. So this is why it's good to go through and adjust those so that you can get it all looking nice. Otherwise, you're just going to have a little bit of information printed on a page like that. Okay, so Page Break Preview is your friend. That is the recommendation I want to leave you with. I'm going to leave it there. There's so much that we covered. I know for some of you, again, if you've been using Excel for a while, then you may have known a lot of that. Hopefully you've picked up a few little things. As I said, it is really important just to learn those foundations before you move on to the intermediate and advanced levels as well. I think we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, Deb, so one question that quite a few people have asked is just to go over what the caret symbol represents, and obviously in reference to BODMAS and formulas.
Yes, okay, let's take a look. So currency symbols, I'm assuming you're talking about these things just here, number formatting. So let's just go down here and I'm just going to type in some numbers. So let's do something on those lines. So for example, say these were, I wanted to format these as, maybe we're talking about pounds, so maybe these are sales figures for January, so let's pull those down. And I want to change these to £200, £300, £400, £500, so on and so forth. There is something, if you go to the Home ribbon, in this Number tab, you have formats, and these are different formats that you can apply to your cells. So you can see here general is no specific format, you've got currency, you've got accounting, and these are the two that you're probably going to use. So if you're creating a spreadsheet that has a lot of numbers in it, so maybe you're doing some kind of accounting spreadsheet, you will want to make sure that your numbers are using either accounting or currency format. And I'll show you the difference between the two. So currency, if I was to select that, you can see there it changes it to £200. You can change, obviously I'm in pounds because I'm in the UK, you can modify that to US dollars, euros, whatever you need to use. Let me just change the rest of them. So currency format will apply the dollar sign or the pound sign or the euro sign or whatever country you're from, that symbol to your data. If I was to use the accountancy format, so if I click the drop down and change it to accountancy, you'll see it's a slightly different format. It works a bit better if I make that cell a bit wider. It will put the symbol all the way over on one side and the actual numbers all the way over on the other side. And I think that's because if you're an accountant, it's a little bit easier if you're doing calculations, adding things up. It's just a nicer format to look at. So it really depends which one you want to use. I've used both over the years, currency and accounting with regards to this. Is that what you meant, or did you mean the dollar signs in formulas? What? Let me just go back to that spreadsheet where I had the I don't think it was that one, was it? Just for those of you on the call, the question that's being asked is there's a little caret symbol, so the little, I always call it the hat, the triangle, I'm not sure. That's not the one I want. So let me just type it in down here. So I don't know if I have a caret symbol on my... Oh, yes, I do. There it is. Okay, so we had that. So when I was looking at the spreadsheet and I had up the way that Excel does calculations, so you've got your brackets for your BODMAS, you've got that, and then you've got your asterisks, and you've got your slash, and you've got your plus, and you've got your minus. So the caret symbol will be used sometimes in formulas. You'll see it as we go across. I'm just trying to find one where it's used. But in relation to BODMAS, when I had these down here, this is just the order that those things will be done in. So the brackets will be done first, the caret symbol will be done second, and then you've got your multiplication and your subtraction. With regards to the caret, I mean, I never use that, to be honest with you. And let's just quickly... There you go, so to the power of symbol. So as I said, it's a very rare one, which, I mean, I don't ever use it, but that's what it is. And that's, with regards to BODMAS, that would be the order that you would do it in. So brackets first, caret symbol, then you've got your multiplication, division, subtraction, and addition. So it's to the power of symbol, essentially. As I said, not particularly that common, but included in the spreadsheet anyway.
Cool, thank you, Deb. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for questions. There are quite a few coming in, but if you do want to email any of those questions into us at info@webinarsteam.com, and we'll try and get a few of those over to Debs if she can help you with those. So thanks everyone for attending, and thank you, Debs, for a very good and informative webinar. Please do join us for our next webinar, which is on June the 1st, and that is Intermediate Excel. So if you've learned a little bit from this one and want to take it a bit further, join us on that one. But that's all from us and all from Debs, and hopefully we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.